The highlights I've made are white, but I'm using a specular map. So for your leaf textures, you want to create a specular map. And I've just plugged that into the highlights channel. Again, like I said, I have my normal map, and always remember with your normal map to make sure it's set at 1 for the gamma. Don't leave it on system gamma. That's for all your normal maps on everything. I'm not using transparency because I'm using an alpha map, so don't mess with the transparency. I'm not using no reflection or translucency on the leaf, but on the effects, always make sure you pull up the backlight again. Like I said, I haven't, the diffuse and ambient are still at their normal values, but I've pulled up a bit on the backlight on the leaf. And that's just to stop any harsh shadows from happening during a render. Okay, so for the leaves, always make sure you're pulling the backlight up. Also for the petals. So again, that's another leaf, and it should already be JPEG. Yep. Now these are the flower buds. Again, the same thing. I'm not using a normal map because it's a bud and I don't really want any bumpiness on it. Again, the highlights are white. I'm not using a specular map on the flowers though. I have pulled up the transparency, the global transparency to about 2%. No reflection, no translucency, but again on the effects you'll see that I pulled the backlight up to 90%. Again on those little flower buds, they're the closed buds on the ivy. I've also pulled up the diffuse colour and the ambient colour. So flowers in view that you've imported from a 3D program, a separate 3D program, pull up the backlight and always pull up the diffuse and the ambient light. Okay. Again, I'm pretty sure these should already be JPEGs. No, it's a Targa actually. Alright. Closed to closed to that one right there. Stem, we'll change that one for a JPEG. Again, these are really small textures, probably not necessary to convert to swap them out for JPEGs, but we'll do it just to keep everything looking consistent. I've forgotten the name. I think I just called it stem. I'll just double check again. Stem. But again, on the effects, I've actually no, with this stem, because they're only very tiny pieces at the bottom of the flowers that attach the flower to the vine, you can leave the default values for that. Now this is the actual flower itself. Flower 2, we'll swap it out for a JPEG. That one there. But again, I have I'm not using a spec map, but I have my highlights on white. I've pulled up the global transparency to about 20% on the flowers themselves. They're the open flowers. And again, no translucency, but with the effects I've pulled up diffuse to 80, ambient to 92 and backlight to 90. So you're always going to go with about a 40 to 60 on the leaf texture and always around about 80 or 90 backlight on flower petals. And again, that's only for flowers that you import from a 3D program. The ones that come with View should already be set up okay. You shouldn't need to change them. This is just if you're making your flowers in Blender or Maya or whatever 3D program you're using, SpeedTree. You'll have to change these settings to make it render correctly in View if you're importing. Stamen TGA. Stamen, that one right there. And again, stamen for anyone that just isn't sure is that those little bits in the very middle of the flower petal, the part usually where the flower has its pollen. Again, I have global transparency at 2% on that, and I have the diffuse and ambient pulled up to 80 and 92 with a backlight of 90%. This is the glass for the urns that the angels are holding and those tri-urns in the background. It's already a JPEG texture. I did import a normal map on this, and when we do a render I'll decide then whether it needs a normal or not. normally I would say don't use a normal map on glass because it's meant to be very smooth. As you can see, the texture though for this glass is it is very textured itself, so I put a normal map on it. If when we render it looks odd, I'll remove the normal map. But aside from that, I think we have swapped all of our textures out. Now I'm going to double check that by going here to my links tab. This is the same in Vue 2015 or 2016 as it is in this old version here. And that was all of the textures that I'm using. These are all my normal maps. You see they're still all Targa. These are my textures. I'm just going to go through to make sure I've got everyone and make sure I've swapped out every Targa texture for a JPEG for my diffuse textures. Just a good way if you're doing this sort of work to double check you haven't missed anything. Again though, your normal maps you'll leave as Targa or PNG or whatever they originally were when you exported them from Gnarled or whatever program you were using. Again though, I can't see any that are Targa that shouldn't be. They all look okay. Again, it's a normal map, so Targa is fine for that. And again, targets for the normal, so that all looks good. So again, if you're doing this sort of thing where you're swapping out texture versions and you just want to double check that you haven't missed one by mistake, go into your links tab here and it will list every texture that the model is currently using. And you can just double check it that way. We look good though. It looks like we have swapped out all of our Targas for JPEGs on the diffuse channel. Now what I want to do is make sure that the pivot point here is actually in the right spot on the model so that when somebody loads this model up into Eon View and wants to drop it down on a surface or a terrain or something, it lines up correctly. If I left my pivot point here, chances are when a person put this model in the program, Vue would move my model into the ground up to the base of that pivot point. And that's just going to be a pain. You want to make sure your pivot point is in the right spot, and that's what I'm going to do now. So you've imported your model into Vue, and you've noticed your pivot points aren't lining up correctly. This is what you'll do to fix it. I'm just going to go through my individual pieces, and then I'm going to do the entire model. So, angel lamp. Right, this is the angel on the right hand side here. You see the pivots in the middle of the angel? If somebody wanted to use this angel on its own, without the rest of the garden terrace, say, they could save this, they could select the model here and save it out as a bob, as a Vue's native format by save object here. But when they imported it and dropped it on in their scene, chances are that Vue's going to move the angel halfway into the ground because the pivot point's in the wrong spot. So let's fix that up. So I'm just going to pull in a bit here on the angel so I can get a better look at her. I'm going to go up here, to my center tab here called numerics. I'm going to go right down to the bottom here, which is my pivot. And I'm going to adjust my pivot point using these settings of the X, Y, and the Z. All I'm really worrying about is the Z because I want to move it down. So you just pull on it until it moves down to the spot that you really want it in. And I want it to be a bit too much. About there. Again, that's just so that when they place this object in their scene, it's going to be at the right level and it won't be sinking into the ground. I'm going to do the same thing with the left angel here. And in fact, I should be able to copy my setting I have here for the other one. Okay. And these are the urns, the same sort of thing. If I don't want the pivot point here to be in the middle. I want it to be at the base. So. Again, though, I'm going to copy that setting to the other end, or that value. Now the garden terrace itself is everything else. Let's work in this viewport here, I think. And even if you position your model correctly in the 3D program you're using for your pivot, chances are when you import it into Eon View, the pivot's not going to be in the right spot. So this is just how you would fix that. Again, I'm just moving it right down to the base of the model. I'm not going to worry about moving the it's in the center of the model, so that's fine. It's just the Z here that I want to make sure I get correct. The pointing angels now. That should be good. And the one on the left hand side, I'm going to copy that value in. The ivy I'm not going to worry about. I'm going to leave the pivot where it already is on the ivy plants. The lamp glass, the same sort of thing. I'm going to leave it where it is. They're not going to really be moving that around without the rest of the model anyway. And that's the same on either side, and also the same for the 3 pieces of glass here on the tri-lamp. I'm not going to change the pivot on that. I'm going to change the pivot though on everything grouped together because it has its own pivot as well. So each separate piece in the group has a pivot, and then the entire object has a pivot too. I'm just going to move the pivot here to around the middle of the object, but I'll start by moving it down. So remember, if it's a grouped object like this is, you'll be changing the pivot on each individual piece in the group and then changing the pivot for the entire group as well. And I also want to move it into around the center of the model. I don't want it all centered like that. I'm just doing it by eye, which is good enough. I mean, we just want to make it easier for people to see the pivot point, and moving it into the middle helps. That should be good enough, I think. So again, all I've done is I've moved the pivot down to the base of the model. It looks like it may have moved it up a little bit. I'm just going to move it down again.
The setting could hardly be more perfect.
Okay.
New eyes, new vision for the world. An unparalleled blending of science and art.
Often it is difficult for a person to control a complicated sound synthesizer
So
quickly enough.
we have swapped out our targets for JPEGs.
Much of this control work.
We have moved our pivot points for each individual part of the model and then for the entire group. I'm just going to close it up so we're working just with the entire group here. So that's all good. The next thing we have to worry about is the scale. Like I said, it's really, really important with Eon View to make sure everything is scaled correctly. For instance, this model at the moment is it's probably about 1, 2, 3, 4, that's 600 meters wide, which is not right. And you can see in the render here, the preview render, you see that haze, that atmosphere? That's because View thinks this is like the size of a building. It's too big. And that's what you can see here with that haze. View thinks it's it's rendering it out as if it's a really, and it is, a really huge object to view in view unit. So even if you get your scale correct in max, chances are when you bring it into view, you're still going to have to make sure your scale is correct here. And you do that by looking at this this little slider here on the side. That'll show you exactly what size the model is at the moment. So we have our model selected. This button here at the bottom is the scale. That's the move, that's the rotate, and this one is the scale. So you click on the scale button. Now make sure you're not scaling just in the X and the Y, you want to scale in all three, so make sure all three turn yellow like that. And we're going to scale it down. Down and down and down. It's way too big. I'm just going to move it over here and zoom in a bit as well. Okay, I'm going to scale it down a bit more first. The reason my zoom is not working correctly is, again, it's a bug in this version of View. My mouse wheel is not overly sensitive, but View is very sensitive when I hit the wheel, so zoom in a bit. Now 10 meters is still way too big. I want the distance between this column and this column here to be about no more than 3 meters. 2 to 3 meters anyway. So again, I'm going to scale it down. But it's just a question of looking at your model, finding a section here that you think, you know, that you want to be a certain size, and lining that up here with the with this little gizmo on the side. Now, see, this is 1 meter, and that's too big. That's too small for what I want. I want to get to like about 3 meters. So I'm going to see if I can zoom out a bit here. Again, I'm using these buttons because my mouse wheel in this version of the software is a bit buggy. Generally, your mouse wheel in 2016 and 2015 versions will be fine. But if it's not, then the plus and the minus here will just give you a bit more finer control. So I know that's 2 meters from there to there, which means that's about 4 meters wide, which is still a bit too big for what I want. So again, I'm going to scale it back a bit more. Line that I'm looking between these two columns here and here, so that front section of the step, to try and gauge my size here. And I know that's 2 meters, so it's still probably a little bit big. Still a little bit big. Just a little bit more. That should be good. That would mean that between that column and that column, that's about 3 meters. So 1, 2, and that much again would take it to about 3 meters. 3 meters is probably good for what we want. It's either going to be like 2.5 to 3 meters. We'll leave it at 3 meters, and if we find that when we bring it into 2016 to start doing our beauty renders, it's looking a bit odd, we'll shrink it again, but I think that should be good. That should be the correct size now. Now I'm just going to move it up to my camera here. Again, I'm going to go to the move tool, the top button, pull it up. Again, our camera now is too high for the model, so let's select our camera and move it down. Select our model and bring it forward. You can also adjust the camera in the viewport here, but it's very fiddly, so I prefer to do it by actually selecting the camera and moving it that way. Again, it's only fiddly in this old version. You won't really have a problem with the newer version. So Let's zoom in here. Select our camera. Might move it up a little bit. We'll move it over a little bit. I may even just rotate it up a little. Alright. So we have, again, just to recap, we have scaled our model correctly. We've swapped out our JPEG textures for, swapped out our target textures for JPEGs. We've set our pivot point correctly. Our model's pretty much good to go. So I'm just going to double check. Pivot's done, JPEG's done, normal maps are done. All the settings for the materials are ready. We should be good. So with that said, I'm going to save this file out because I don't trust this version of the software not to crash when I do an export on this model so that we can take it into the new version. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a break for a few minutes. While I'm doing that, I'm going to save this file out. I know it takes about 10 minutes to save the file before we export it for view 2015. So I will be back in a few minutes, guys. I'll grab a fresh cup of coffee. While I'm doing that, I'm going to save the file, and when we come back, it's probably still going to be saving, but we won't have to wait quite as long. So I will be back in just a few minutes. I'll save the file out, and then we'll come back and we'll do an export on this to Vue's native object format so that we can import it into the new version of Vue to start working with. So I'll be back in just a couple of minutes, guys. Okay, it's still saving out. You can see it down here in the corner where it's up to. It will take it a good 5 minutes longer. So while it's doing that, let's jump into scaling this. Every time I say that. I'm going to go to Eon View and show you guys this software. So this is just for the benefit of any of you guys that might want to download the PLE Personal Learning Edition to check it out. The company is called Eon Software, and the software is called Eon View, VUE. Now, they have released a new version called 2016. I believe, though, that the Personal Learning Edition is still 2015. And I will be using 2015. I haven't upgraded my version either yet, so I probably will at some stage, but 2015 for the moment does everything that I need, so where are we? They have different versions of the software, as you can see. Vue Pioneer is their free version. It's limited, but it's usable. So if you wanted a completely free version, you'd use that. That's not what I'm recommending, though. I'm recommending you actually go to the PLE and trial versions just here. Yeah, they haven't updated it yet for 2016, and this is the version that I'm going to be using. I'm not using this PLE version, but 2015.2 is the version of Vue that I will be creating the 3D environment in. So the software is exactly the same. Yeah, they just restrict your render out to 1920 by 1080 in the free version here. It should be enough for most people anyway. So if you want to go to Eon Vue's software website, eonsoftware.com, you can download their PLE version here, try it out, see whether you like it or not. If you do like it and you do want to buy it, they do have different, like I said, versions of the software. You don't have to go with their top of the range version here. They have an artist version and Pioneer, which is always free. Most people, generally, the artist version will be quite fine. The PLE version is based on their top of the range software, which is Infinite and Extreme. They're really meant for studios to use. They have a lot of features and functions that large studios would find useful. If you're just an artist and you're working on your own and you just want to have a program that can create really realistic 3D environments, the artist version here should be fine if you did want to buy it. But by all means, download the Personal Learning Edition and try it out. get a feel for the software and as to whether you like it or not, whether it'll do what you want. I haven't really come across any other software that like this, to be honest. As far as creating 3D environments go, full on vegetation, grass, trees, that type of thing. There's really nothing else on the market like it. I think World Machine is probably the closest you get to it. I haven't used World Machine. I played with it, but I haven't used it much. I like this software. I've used this software now for many years. Like I said, it creates really realistic scenes and scenery. You don't have to use it as a 3D program. Like if you don't want to animate, by all means, that's what it's for. It's for animating 3D, full-on 3D environments. But I know a lot of concept artists use it to render out stills for their background images. So it can be used that way as well. So you set up your scene, you render it out, you take that into Photoshop when you're creating your concept work as a background for the character or whatever you're working on. I know quite a few concept guys that use it for that. Like I said, though, it's a 3D program, so it's the 3D animation of your environments. So you can certainly use it that way. The renderer can be a bit slow. That's the only problem with the software, and they have improved it over the years. For each version, it's gotten faster and faster. But if you're used to doing renders in your 3D software like Max or Blender or Mouya, it's not as fast as that. But bear in mind, it has to deal with billions of polygons in a scene, so it's not really fair to compare it to the Maxwell renderer or the V-Ray renderer or Mental Rates. It has to deal with a lot more, so just bear that in mind when you're doing your renders. They're going to take longer than you're normally used to by using 3D software because there is so much that it has to render out. And remember, it takes your complete atmosphere into account, so all of the particles in the atmosphere is what it's rendering out too, so it takes it a lot longer. There are tricks you can use to speed that up, which I'll probably show you depending on how I set this scene up for the garden terrace. There are ways that you can speed up your render times through the settings in View. We'll get into that though more when we're finished setting up our scene and start doing renders. It's going to take a little while to set the scene up. We're not going to get it done in a day. It's one of those things that to do it properly, take your time. Once we've set it up, then we'll work on optimizing some of the render settings so that our renders don't take days to render out. You'll find if you use View's default atmospheres, I'll show you when we load up View 2015, but you can load in atmospheres that come with the program, preset atmospheres for your lighting. They don't tend to be optimized very well, and they will take a long time to render. I generally don't use their preset atmospheres. I usually set up my render by hand and don't preload an atmosphere. Usually I don't even use clouds in my scenes. It does clouds really nicely, but because I render a lot of beauty shots for my models, I don't tend to render really large environments anyway. I tend to concentrate on a render of the model because that's what I need to make, just, when I put my model online, the beauty shot is of my model. And the restrictions of being a broker for the company are that they really want, when you're trying to sell your models, just to show what you're trying to sell. So me rendering out a huge environment is pointless if I'm selling just a model. So my renders are going to be concentrating on just my garden terrace model because that's one of the restrictions for being a broker. I have to just concentrate on what it is that I'm putting online. So yeah. But anyway, if you do want to use the software, that's where you go. That's what it's called. I do believe you have to set up an account to download it, but it's free to set up an account. They just need your email address. Use a throwaway email address if you want, like Yahoo or something like that. Gmail. Don't use your real email address if you don't want to. But you'll have to set up an account because they give you I think it's a license code. When you install it, you'll need the license code. Let's check on our thing here. See, we're still saving out. It looks like it's stopped, but it hasn't. It just freezes up. Again, this is a really old version of the software, so don't judge the software on the version I'm showing you just here for the model, because this is an old version. The new versions have gotten much better. They're less buggy, less laggy. They behave a lot better. But because this version is like 6 versions ago, so we're talking at least 6 or 7 years old as far as versions go, it's a bit buggy. And again, we're only doing it in this version so that people that use the older versions of the software will be able to load this model up. If I just created it in the new version, then people using the old version wouldn't be able to use this model. So, and there are a lot of people that still use version 9, 10, 11. Again, so that's the reason that I'm using this version 9, just so that as many people as possible will be able to use the model. You guys working with your 3D software wanting to use it though, jump straight into 2015, unless you want to sell your stuff online. And then you should use an old version. Like I said, it's still saving out. It looks like it's frozen down here, but it hasn't. It is still saving out. This is just the way that this old version of the software behaves. We'll wait a bit longer here. But again, I just wanted to show you guys what the software is, where you can download a copy of it to try it out for free from. It is very good software. Like I said, there really is nothing on the market that I've come across that's like it. If you're just doing small scenes, like in ArchViz, a lot of the times if we're just doing a render of the building, we use V-Ray in the studio. We'll just use multi-scatter or something like that to create the grass and put a few trees and things in. They're not so concerned with an environment per se for ArchViz, they're more concerned with the model of the building. So we'll do it that way in V-Ray. But if you do want a program that will create really beautiful renders for you of proper full-on 3D environments, this is the software to use. And there is nothing else like it, like I said, that I've come across on the market. And it's free to try, so you know, if you're interested, do download it, do try it out, see if you like it. You got nothing to lose apart from some hard drive space. And it is good software. Remember guys, if you've got any questions for me, feel free to pop into chat and ask me. Again, if you just want to watch, that's completely fine. But we're just going to have to wait until this software decides it's finished saving out. And like I said, it's an old version of the software, it's going to take it a little while. But I did want to save it out because I know with this software, it really likes to crash when we go to export this model now in Vue's native format. 9 times out of 10 the software has crashed on me, and I don't want to lose all that work we did by swapping out the targets for JPEGs and moving our pivot points and scaling the model correctly. If we just jumped straight into trying to export the model and the software crashed, we would have lost all that work. So by saving the file out ahead of time, if the program crashes, it's no big deal. We just load it up again and reload the scene, and we can try exporting again. Gives you guys a bit of a chance anyway while it's saving out to check the model out there in the viewport. We have our normal maps assigned to pretty much most of the model. The only bits and pieces we didn't put a normal map on were the angel statues, the urns, the wrought iron work and the fence here. Pretty much everything else though I think has been normal mapped. So again, this viewport though is not really a good estimation of what the model will look like once it starts to be rendered. This is again a very low resolution type OpenGL viewport, or actually think it uses DirectX now, but it's very low res lighting and shadowing still. But you can get an idea of the normal map. You can see it here on these stairs, those bumps and things. That's all being created through the normal map. And we didn't normal map the wrought iron work because, again, you're not really going to notice it on this metal work. We didn't normal map the statues because there's enough detail already in the statues that they won't really benefit from a normal map. The same with the urns. We really only wanted the normal maps to simulate the stonework, to give it a bit more of an interesting look when the light hits it when we start doing a render, as opposed to being just a flat texture. The same with these tiles here at the top and at the front. We used a normal map because they're just flat planes, and we want to give it a bit more depth and a bit more realism, and the normal map will help to do that up here on the tiles. What else? Yes, we went over the changes to the materials for any plants that you import. Again, always remember to up the backlighting in the materials and the effects tab, and to also pull up on the diffuse texture brightness a bit, and that'll just help to stop the plants from having too harsh a shadow, because the backlight simulates the light bouncing to the back of the plant, so it stops those really dark shadows from happening, which you're going to get if you don't up the backlighting. It just makes the plants look more realistic and render properly in the program. Even though I did it in Vue version 9, those settings are exactly the same in Vue version 2015 or 2016, whatever the latest one is. They haven't changed a lot. What they tend to do over the generations of the software is add things to it. It's a bit like Autodesk do with Macs. They add more and more stuff. They don't really change too much of the interface. So a lot of what I've shown you as far as the material setup here goes is the same in the new version of the software. This version doesn't have particles, but the new version they added rain and snow and that type of particle work as well. I really wish they'd add like setting up rivers and streams much more easily. It's still a bit fiddly to do in the program. You can use splines and things like that to create a riverbed or a stream. I wish they'd work on improving that a bit more. I find with the particles that they added, it's finished saving out. I find with the particles that they added, I don't use them. I never create a scene where it's raining or where it's snowing generally, so good to have, but most times it's not used. Alright, so we have our program saved here in case it decides to crash when we start doing our export. And that's what I mean, but the normal map is helping here to create that bumped look here along the front of the stairs, because again they're just flat, and it's the normal map that's giving the illusion of stone. It'll be the same when we get an angle where we can see the tiles and the mosaic here at the top. So anyway, we have saved our file. We've fixed our JPEGs, we've fixed our axes, we've scaled the model correctly, and again you can see in the viewport here, now that it's been scaled correctly, it doesn't have that haze running through it, and that was the atmosphere because it was such a large object. When Vue did the preview render up here, it was simulating the atmosphere. It was like, going to the size of a building, which was wrong.